Let's take a look at our plain brioche square. This is what we'll be making. The back side, the front side, and honestly I like the front because I like the way that the knit stitches are sort of bouncy, but I also like the back, and I like that little bit of almost a herringbone pattern that you see developing along those ribs. It's a very, very pretty pattern, and it's very stretchy, so you may find that you'll need a couple fewer stitches, or you may find that you're a bit of a tight knitter and you'll need a few more stitches in order to make our square about 6 inches. I have decided to cast on with a little stretchier cast on. So I actually cast on with a knitted on cast on, and looking at this, I might even, if I were starting this square and going to keep it, I might even go back and cast it on so that it was just a little bit looser yet, because again, you get so much stretch in this brioche stitch that it's important that you have a stretchy cast on and a stretchy bind off with that square so that your edges aren't too tight. So let's take a look then at the actual directions for our plain brioche square. You'll see that we are going to cast on 22 stitches with color number 500 milk, but I'm actually not using milk this month. I'm going to use boho once again because I like the pretty purple. Once you've cast on your 22 stitches, you're going to follow the chart and repeat the stitches between the red lines 10 times. You'll work the entire chart, those rows 1, 2, and 3, once. But after you've done that once, we're going to just repeat rows 2 and 3 for the rest of your square. And I've indicated 19 more times, but again, you may need to do that a few more times or a few less times in order to get to that 6-inch square. We are only going to repeat rows 2 and 3 because row 1 is a setup row. It's setting us up so that we can be successful in the rest of the square. So we need to take that into account. We only knit row 1 once, and then we repeat rows 2 and 3 to the end of our square. When you bind off, remember to bind off loosely. Remember I said that was important. I would probably go back if I were remaking this square and I would bind it off a little more loosely and I would cast on a little more loosely, just because that brioche stitch grows so much that it's important to give it that space to bloom in the bottom and the top of your square. Now, if you look at our chart, we have some symbols that you haven't seen before. So it's going to be important to go back to your key to find those symbols and read the descriptions before you get started. So we have a BRK, which on the right side means that you will knit the stitch together with its yarn over. And you'll understand that better once I show you, but we're going to read through really quick. On the wrong side, it says that you knit the stitch together with its yarn over. So that's an important thing, is that we're constantly knitting that stitch together with its yarn over. Next one we're going to look at is the swirly stitch. You're going to yarn over and slip the next stitch on the needle purlwise, but do not drop the yarn over or the slipped stitch. So you'll actually have an extra stitch in each repeat of that pattern on every row, and that is part of why it grows so much. It's because you're giving that each row extra stitches, which you're then taking away, but then you add extra stitches and you take them away, and you add extra stitches and you take them away. So when you go to bind off, it's really important that you bind off those extra stitches with their parent stitch. That's how I think of it. And we'll talk about that more as I show you how to do these 2 very, very easy stitches. Now, if you want to, you can, with that BRK, you can actually purl the stitch together with its yarn over on the back side. That will give it a slightly different look. I don't think that either way is wrong. I think it's just a little different presentation. So you can choose to go ahead and knit that stitch together or purl that stitch together. It's totally up to you. And I like it both ways. I think it looks good both ways. It's really just your preference. I tend to purl it because I'm on a wrong side row and that is more comfortable for me, but you are more than welcome to knit that stitch or purl that stitch, and I will show you both in my next video. So I've already cast on my 22 stitches. I'm going to rearrange things and then show you how to do that first row. Now that I have those 22 stitches cast on, and I chose a knitted on cast on because it's nice and stretchy, and I made certain that I left extra space between my stitches when I cast on. Let's look at that first row. We're going to slip that first stitch, knit the next stitch, and then we have that funny brioche stitch here, that swirly stitch. And over in the written directions, it's written as YFSL1YO. And that's actually all one command for our knitting stitch. What that means is that you would yarn forward and then slip one yarn over. So one method of doing the brioche stitch is to bring the yarn forward and insert the right needle into the next stitch purlwise, but instead of purling, you just slip the stitch to the right needle along with the yarn over. And that's fine. But what I prefer is what is actually written down here, where it says to yarn over and slip the next stitch on the needle purlwise, but do not drop the yarn over or the slipped stitch. It's two different techniques that produce an identical fabric, despite the slight difference in working methods. So you can really choose which way you want to do it. You can do that yarn forward and then slip one yarn over, or you can do the action as I have described it, where you yarn over first and then you slip the next stitch on the needle purlwise. So that's why you'll see the abbreviation written as it is, but the description as it is in my directions. So now that we have discussed that, let's go ahead and get started with that first row. Because I chose to use a knitted on cast on, I have to make certain that when I slip the first stitch knitwise on this row, that I knit one through the back loop with the next stitch. Otherwise, these stitches will come undone at the very end. But I only have to do that if I'm using a knitted on cast on. Otherwise, you can just slip one and then knit the next stitch as it's written. So now let's do that special swirly stitch. We're just going to yarn over, put that needle in to our stitch on the left hand, and then slip that stitch from the left hand needle to the right hand needle purlwise. That's all it is. We're going to knit the next stitch, yarn over, insert that needle into the first stitch on that left hand, go ahead and slip it purlwise. And that's all that brioche stitch is. So for this first row, which is our setup row, we need to continue to knit one and then perform that brioche stitch all the way across. I'll get back to you in just a moment when I'm ready for row 2. So my first row is now done and I am ready to turn my needle around to work row 2. Let's look at our instructions for row 2. We are going to slip that first stitch and then perform a BRK, and that is a brioche knit stitch. So what we'll do is we will check our chart key, and it says that we are going to knit the stitch together with its yarn over, whether it's on the right side or the wrong side. Now that we are ready for row 2, let's go ahead and we'll slip that first stitch purlwise because we are on the back row. And then we are going to move our yarn to the back. We are going to knit 2 together and then perform that brioche stitch where we yarn over and slip the next one. So knit those 2 together, yarn over and slip one purlwise. Knit 2 together, yarn over and slip one purlwise. So I'm going to do that all the way across the row, and then I will show you how to do row 3. Having worked row 2, let's look at row 3. We're on that right side again. We'll slip one. We will work that BRK, which is that brioche knit stitch. And again, we're just going to knit the yarn over with its knit stitch together. I like to think of them as the parent and child stitch. And then we will go ahead and do our yarn over and slip the next stitch purlwise. And we'll do that all the way across the row. So we'll slip one, knit those 2 together, yarn over, slip one purlwise, knit 2 together, yarn over, slip 1 purlwise, and we're just going to do that all the way across the row. So I'm going to go ahead and work the rest of this row and work enough of the pattern so that you can see it really start to develop, and then I'll be back with you. So now that I have gone a few rows in, you can really see the pattern start to develop. And this is by doing that knit on every side. So you knit 2 together on every side. And now I'm going to show you a little variation, and it's what I actually used for the second block that I made. And I'm going to go ahead and knit 2 together on one side and purl 2 together on the opposite side and show you what that looks like. So here's the difference between doing that knit 2 together on every row, so you get more of a rib pattern, and doing that purl 2 together on the back side instead of a knit 2 together. And so you can see they're two very different patterns. When you block the one on top, it looks more like this, and you can see that stretch of the yarn overs as it crosses in between. This one will look more like proper ribbing, and you can just choose which one you like better. I like both, but it really depends on what your personal preference is. I like the little cross hatching in the back on the one that I've knit and purled instead of knit and knit on. But again, that's up to you, what you'd like to do. You can follow the pattern exactly as it's written, or you can try out that little variation on the brioche stitch and try the purl in the back. So I'm going to go ahead, and I think it's time to check out our second square for the month.